It's another day, and we have yet another indictment against former President Donald Trump. Look, all these indictments are doing is proving that Trump truly does live up to his nickname, Teflon Don, because the more they throw at him, the stronger he gets. And that's not just my opinion. The data shows this. The polling shows this. I know I showed this on my channel yesterday, but for new viewers, Trump is polling stronger right now against Kamala Harris than he did this exact same week against Joe Biden in 2020 and this exact same week in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. And of course, Trump went on to win in 2016, and we all know what happened in 2020. But it's not just about the polling in swing states. It's also about Trump's favorability ratings, which are the highest they've ever been since he entered national politics. Compare that to Jack Smith. Jack Smith's cases are quite literally falling apart. His Mar-a-Lago case, the classified documents case, was tossed out. And yes, I know it's under appeal, but Judge Aileen Cannon found that Jack Smith's appointment for that case was unconstitutional. And this latest indictment against former President Donald Trump is quite literally smaller. It's fewer pages than Jack Smith's original indictment. It's filled with potholes, and it stretches legal theory to its limits. In fact, it's so bad that CNN even dedicated an entire segment to warning that this case could crumble and fall apart under Jack Smith's own 2 feet. Here's what they had to say.
Jim Truss, City Councilor, thank you so much for being with us. Jack Smith changed this indictment, no longer referring to Donald Trump as the 45th president of the United States, but calling him a candidate for president, taking out the charges and references to conversations he had with people in the Justice Department. How far does this go toward addressing the ruling from the Supreme Court?
Now, before Trusty answers, I do want to correct something that John Berman said. I don't think he did it on purpose. I think it was probably a slip of the tongue or just poor phrasing. But Jack Smith did not remove any charges. It's the same 4 charges against former President Donald Trump: a conspiracy to defraud the United States, a civil rights offense, and then 2 counts of obstructing Congress. Now, the reason this indictment is smaller, the reason it's fewer pages, is because Jack Smith removed evidentiary material. As John Berman indicated, as he hinted towards, Jack Smith removed references to Trump talking to members of the Justice Department because those could potentially be viewed as official presidential acts. And as we all know, earlier this year, the Supreme Court ruled on presidential immunity, so that's why that evidentiary material was removed. Now, what's really peculiar, what's really unusual is that Jack Smith decided to still include those last 2 charges of obstructing Congress, because the Supreme Court has already ruled on this. In Fisher versus the United States, the High Court ruled that January 6 defendants were innocent of obstruction. And what the High Court said was that in this case, obstruction referred to specifically the destruction or tampering or spoilage of physical material, such as paper. I believe when obstruction was first used in a legal sense, it was actually an accounting issue where I believe it was accountant committed fraud and they tampered the physical documentation, right? And so what the Justice Department tried to do is they misused that charge on January 6 defendants. And that is a difference I would like to point out between conservative judges and conservative interpretation of the law versus leftist judges and leftist interpretation of the law. Because when you look at obstruction of Congress or obstructing an official proceeding, you might say, well, January 6th was clearly an obstruction. But in the legal sense, when it comes to case law, when it comes to precedent, when it comes to how it was intended, it was always about physical documentation and obstructing a proceeding by tampering with that physical evidence, with those physical documents. What the left is trying to do is they're trying to say, well, we think the law says this, and so therefore we should apply the law in whatever ways we see fit. And that obviously is a dark and dangerous path. It's a slippery slope. So every time I'm going to side with conservative judges who try to understand the original intent of the law. Just my 2 cents.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of aggressively being defensive. It's paring back the indictment to try to anticipate how the judge would rule on this official acts quandary that he finds himself in after the Supreme Court case on immunity that basically says personal acts are prosecutable, official acts are not. So he's anticipating that, but it's really interesting because the opinion says not just that immunized information is not properly before the court at trial, but that it contaminates the grand jury process if you include that information in pursuing an indictment. That's a huge landmine. He's trying to get in front of it before Judge Chutkan has to rule on all of these acts to decide which stuff is fair game or which stuff isn't. But the problem is if he guesses wrong in one instance, like in other words, if he says, the president was consulting Mike Pence as president of the Senate, not as vice president, which is part of this new indictment, then if he gets it wrong once, he's got the same problem. He's got to go back to the grand jury, re-indict for the third time based on this ruling coming from the Supreme Court. So,
okay, I know there was a lot of jargon there. So to clarify, Jack Smith's new indictment against former President Trump is smaller than his other one. Yes, it's the same 4 charges, but it's smaller because he's removed the evidentiary material. And the biggest change is he's now trying to allege that Trump did these things as a private citizen, not as president of the United States, because again, the Supreme Court ruled on presidential immunity. But because of that, Jack Smith is walking a very fine line. He's walking on a tightrope. And one of the arguments that Jack Smith is making in this new indictment, because he's saying that Trump acted as a private citizen and not as president of the United States, is that when Trump talked to Mike Pence, he wasn't talking to Mike Pence as vice president of the United States. He was actually talking to Mike Pence as president of the Senate. In other words, Jack Smith was saying, well, if Trump had talked to Vice President Mike Pence, then he was acting as the president. It would be an official act if he was talking to the vice president. But if Trump talked to the president of the Senate, then it's Trump talking to him not as the president, but talking to him as a private citizen, which doesn't make any sense because the vice president of the United States is president of the Senate. They are two sides of the same coin. The responsibility is shared. The responsibility is the same. I don't see the differentiator. They're the same thing. They're not distinguishable, at least not to my eyes. But again, I don't have a law degree. I don't know. But that's exactly what Testi is saying here, is that if Jack Smith is wrong on any one of his far-fetched legal theories, not only will that one portion be struck down, but the entire indictment will be struck down. And if he wants to charge President Trump, he'll have to bring up a third round of indictments. And that, of course, is not only a horrible look for Jack Smith, but it's a bad look for the Justice Department itself.
No, because the Supreme Court set the bar very, very high here, just as a thematic matter, 30,000 feet. How complicated is it, then, to charge a president for any actions that he or she may take as a candidate? Doesn't this give a presidential candidate who happens to be president just incredibly wide latitude?
Now, again, I want to correct Berman because his phrasing of the question is just convoluted and wrong. And it's not just him. It's all of the media and all of the Democrats, because the Democrats have been trying to create this narrative around the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, right? They've been trying to say that Donald Trump is a dictator, a fascist, and that the GOP is promoting fascism. And the reason they've said that is because they're twisting what the Supreme Court of the United States actually said. They're trying to claim that the Supreme Court ruled that the president can do anything. The president is immune from any charges, but that is not true. What the Supreme Court ruled, what the Supreme Court said, is that the president is immune only from acts that are official to that office. And of course, the United States Constitution, Article 2, outlines specific acts of the president. For example, commander-in-chief, execution of laws, appointment powers. They can grant pardons. They can negotiate treaties. There are very specific things that are within the purview of the presidency. And by the way, if you are scared of a president being a dictator, then that is just proof that the executive branch has gone too far. That is proof that the federal government is just out of control, and specifically the federal branch, because we're supposed to have checks and balances. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. It's the left, and Joe Biden's the perfect example of this, who have tried to broaden the powers of the executive branch, such as Joe Biden trying to single-handedly forgive student loans, which I just saw a notification just now that the Supreme Court has put a temporary halt on that. Thank goodness.
Well, it does. I mean, I don't know if I'd say it happens to be president. I mean, the focus is not in terms of whether you have immunity as a candidate. It's that you're a sitting president. And the bottom line is, the Constitution seems to suggest, and that's what the Supreme Court ruled on, that in fact we don't want to have our presidents hobbled with constant fear of prosecution by state and federal prosecutors. So,
and again, I think everyone understands at this point that none of this will get decided or go to trial before the election in November. A lot of focus has been paid to what happens if Donald Trump wins. Obviously, East Coast cases just go away completely. But what do you think happens if he loses, Counselor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, look, I think that a lot of the prosecutions of President Trump, from my perspective, are very singular, very inventive, very different.
That right there is a key quote that I want you to keep track of. Very singular, very inventive, very different. And that just proves that Jack Smith, and not just Jack Smith, but Alvin Bragg, they are literally stretching legal theory. And I just want to go back to that earlier point that Jack Smith is trying to make a difference between Mike Pence as president, as vice president of the United States, and then Mike Pence as president of the Senate. And that Trump was supposedly talking to two different Mike Pences. I mean, no, the vice president of the United States is president of the Senate. They're the same responsibility, shared responsibility.
And you can call it lawfare, and I certainly have called it that. It tends to make the judges bristle. The judges are becoming the safety valve. They have to look at questions they've never had to address and figure out, are we going to let this proceed? So I think if you look at the Jack Smith prosecutions, both of them now have significant legal issues. Obviously, down in Mar-a-Lago, the case was dismissed, and that appeal is being pursued by the government. You've got the immunity question, and frankly, the same question about Jack Smith's authority that could be raised in D.C. on the January 6th case. So they may die of their own weight without any sort of political interference because they're inventive, because they're reaching for new territory.
So there you have it. He is saying that this case could just die on its own accord, could crumble beneath Jack Smith's feet. That would obviously be a blow to the Justice Department, extremely embarrassing, not only for Jack Smith, but the entire Joe Biden regime. Now, there are two other stories I want to get to today. One of them is a story about Politico. Politico ran this headline yesterday, "Our Corrupt Leadership," a quote by J.D. Vance. Vance tries to tether Harris to Biden during a Michigan rally. Well, excuse me, Politico, but Kamala Harris is tethered to Joe Biden because she is his vice president. They are tethered together. Let's take a look at that headline again. They don't say it, but they're trying to create this impression that J.D. Vance is purveying misinformation, right? They're trying to create this impression that J.D. Vance is trying to mislead voters by tethering Harris to Biden. That's the impression I get from that headline. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. But fortunately, on X, formerly known as Twitter, they added a community note. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, community notes are basically these notes where readers can add context. Kamala Harris is currently serving as Vice President of the United States for the Biden-Harris administration, a role which she has sworn into on January 20th, 2021. So I love that Politico got a community note on their own story, how humiliating for them. And in case Politico wants to see a physical tether between the two, just take a look at the WhiteHouse.gov website. The Biden-Harris administration. There is your tether. They are tethered together. They are tied together. Last but not least, Cornel West has now admitted on a podcast that Kamala Harris's campaign has tried to bribe him into dropping out of the race. I think this is actually really alarming. Here's what Cornel West had to say.
Did they just one more on this? Did they offer you? Did they offer you a cabinet position, a lower position, and offer to pay off any of your campaign debt?
Well, they offered serious substantive conversation about all of those that could lead toward some real
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
And
all I'm saying is that if that were President Trump, if President Trump were Kamala Harris, and if President Trump had tried to bribe someone else, a third-party candidate, to drop out of the race, we all know he would be accused of a quid pro quo. Am I right or am I right? Also, that right there proves that Kamala Harris really is afraid of those third-party candidates, because Cornel West, from the last I looked, he was actually polling worse than RFK Jr. So if Cornel West's vote share can damage Kamala Harris, then I think RFK Jr. will as well. And so that right there is a really great insight into what the Harris campaign is fearful of. And it's really great insight into what they're thinking right now as far as their strategy to get to 270 electoral votes. But as always, all of this is just my analysis, just my opinion. And I would love to know yours in the comments below. What do you think about this new Jack Smith indictment? Do you agree with my analysis and CNN's analysis? Or are there any things you disagree about? I'm always reading everyone's comments. Look, the channel has blown up recently, and I am so thankful to all of you for watching. I find it humbling, really humbling, really, because I'm just a normal person giving my views and thoughts on the world and on current events, and so I don't take it for granted that you are taking time out of your day, your life, to watch my video. So if there's something I can learn from you by reading your comments, please let me know. I do learn a lot. Just because I don't reply, it doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean that I don't value your time. It's just I'm trying, especially when people email, I'm working through emails to reply. It just, a lot come in. And I'm trying to get it to everyone. And if I don't, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I don't reply, please don't take it personally. I'm doing the best I can. I'm just a one-man operation, but I do thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. I know it's a simple thing to ask, but it really does help me in the algorithm to reach more viewers like you. Be sure to smash that subscribe button and to check out one of these videos.